A good day, no matter where you may be. Dr. B, Aleda,
Hello.
Katie, and Nick. We're happy to have you. What I want to do to put this in context so that people have an appreciation for what it is that each of you do, we're going to go round robin as opposed to me introducing you. We'll start with Katie, and everyone can mute their mics while we go, and then we'll pass it on so that people have an understanding of who it is that's going to be sitting with us to join us in this panel on Wellness GPT. Please.
Oh, thanks, Chris. I'm Katie Walker. I am a nurse by trade. I've been a nurse for a little over 20 years, and I have 2 advanced degrees, one in anesthesia, one in psychiatry. I helped to create a company called Revitalist in the United States, to where we offered ketamine infusions primarily. Really, a lot of my passion kind of came from the creation of the company, to where when I was sitting in the outpatient world, kind of moving from the inpatient world of working in the hospitals for about 20 years, I started noticing that there was such a great deficit in the outpatient world, to where we're not meeting the needs of anyone really on a gross level, to where we really just need to update the entire system. So the company that I've created continues to grow based off of need, not only for adults, but also for adolescents, for geriatrics. Really, I mean, we're all underserved right now. I think some of us are trying to advocate the best that we know how, but we're not getting the support that we need. So that's something that we've really tried to not only hear, but also to start effectively addressing. So that's a little bit about me.
Thank you for sharing, Katie. Aleda. Microphone, please.
Hi, Christopher. Thank you. Thanks for having me. Katie, I have strong appreciation for your background and your experience. I myself am a medical business consultant, and you were touched on outpatient. So a big part of what I was doing, and the reason why I'm here and I'm so passionate about it, is because about 6 weeks before we came into the pandemic, I was subcontracted by a group of practitioners, oddly enough, in the city of New York. So I have strong appreciation. I have understanding of our gaps and our needs across the board, many of which you pointed out. I know where we're at. I have some comprehension of where we're headed, the same as everybody else here today. There's a future that still awaits us that I don't think any of us truly understand or know just yet, but I believe it to be an exciting time. And that's the stance that I take on it. While it might cause a lot of angst across the board, I also have strong appreciation for humanity and the people who are here today and the people who are out there globally. So thank you.
Terrific. Thank you, Aleda. Dr. B. Seems like we have a bit of latency.
Hi, Dr. Morgan.
Oh, go for it. We're with you. No, we're not. Nick, you're up. Unmute your mic, sir.
Sure. Chris, thank you so much for organizing this and inviting us. My name is Nick Murray. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Wake Network. And my background is primarily in technology. I was born with a laptop, you could say, and I've been building software all my life, and really in the last decade focused on the blend of health and tech and how do those two work together, bringing some of the latest and greatest devices into people's homes, into clinicians' workspaces so that they can offer it to their patients, and really allowing for that data to help guide that journey, whether it's the patients, their families, or the medical practitioners that are helping them. I've really been excited to see what's going on with AI. I do hear the angst. I feel the angst. It's a bit of a worrying new tool, but at the same time, humans have been able to work with technology for thousands, for millennia. And I think in this instance, we will find a way through it as well. So blending things like sensors, wearables, patient-reported outcomes, the ability for patients to have a little bit more knowledge on their well-being, that whether it's their body, their mind, and really having an active role in that excursion which they're on right now. So their health journey has traditionally really been kind of a top-down. I think this hopefully will allow them to have a little more knowledge and a little bit more of a say in how that journey explores. And so very excited to have this conversation with all of you today.
Indeed. And while we're attempting to get Dr. B back on, let's chop wood. We're going to move forward. Audience, we're seeing this explosion of artificial intelligence unlike any other type of technology been adopted contemporary to our time. It has the profound impact to transform whole entire industries, which we're seeing right now in this transition as we yet speak and gather here today. We gather here clearly under the banner of wellness and to understand the intersectionality of how we might use these technologies, not just limited to AI, but the metaverse, because it interacts and interweaves with this technology and other different types of technology, such as, and we'll be talking about decentralization, Web3, Web2 subsequent. Katie, I want you to bring us into a world from your lens experience of what you've been doing as you briefed us in your introduction, but on the arrival of artificial intelligence, someone that's on this front line, if you will, to better understand, and now that you've had time to think about and exchange with colleagues and begin to look at what does this world, this sea change tsunami that is headed your way, it may have very well reached your shore already. What does that look like to you right now?
So I mean, mine's a little bit more, I'm more ignorant to all the AI stuff as you and Nick and such. But one thing that I've noticed, so like my anesthesia degree is a pretty high intensity degree to where I didn't get to work for 3 years and it was like 80-hour weeks. But with that degree, right? So we're about 99 anesthesia. Actually, pilots and anesthesia are two of the safest professions out there, believe it or not. But we're so safe because it's all evidence-based, right? So we really have figured out anesthesia down to a granular level. There's so much evidence-based data. And then it's not subjective, right? That's the beautiful thing about anesthesia. There's different ways that we can do things, yes, but to get kind of the final outcome is very consistent. One thing I noticed when I moved to the mental health space more specifically is mental health is extremely subjective. It's extremely theoretical. And Dr. Bronstein can speak about this too. But, one thing that I've noticed that where I feel like AI could come into place is what psychedelics and ketamine are allowing us to do is to look at the brain from a very neurologic perspective. And it takes out a lot of that subjectivity and opinions because, one person could go to just 10 different providers and they can receive 10 different diagnoses. But what psychedelics and ketamine are showing us is how consistent it is. So there's a way that we can integrate AI to help make mental health much more objective with data instead of it really being, opinions based on values of individual people, then I think that we would be able to duplicate a system that is of much higher efficacy. And again, Dr. Bronstein could speak about this more so, but I think that's where AI would come in a ton, right? To where if there's a way that we can make the data more objective, make it more consistent, and really kind of take off that subjective opinions from providers onto patients. And that would help to decrease the burnout, I feel, as well, too, because providers are doing the best that they can do with with the tools that they have. But if there's a way that we can consistently make some type of screening tool that would help us to look at, based on these symptoms, this might be what this person's struggling with, to where a provider could actually look at the data and then analyze the data instead of having to create the data on their own. I feel like that's where AI would come in hugely.
Thank you, Katie. And thank you once again for joining us, Dr. Bronstein. We're happy to have you. I'm going to pass the baton to you. But before we do that, audience, welcome to everyone that's joining at GatherVerse.live. We're happy to have you. Right now, we're talking about the intersection of wellness and artificial intelligence. Dr. Bronstein, can you give us a brief introduction of who you are so we have a better understanding of who's expressing to us? And we'll also meet up the question is, wellness and AI, is it a hindrance or is it helpful? Go ahead, sir.
My name is Dr. Mark Bronstein. I'm a child, adolescent, and adult psychiatrist. I've been doing that for about 25 years. I've been involved with psychedelics for about 30 years. And my practice They kind of have a niche practice of really focusing on mental wellness and mental health instead of mental illness. I do a lot of de-prescribing of psychiatric medications and helping people really to take control of their mental health through positive lifestyle changes. It's very interesting when we talk about AI and psychiatry, because much of what psychiatry does now is simply psychopharmacology and med prescribing. And you're right, there's a lot of subjective input by the psychiatrist, not necessarily be trying to make an objective assessment. And I really see it be psychiatric.
Well, we're getting Dr. Bronstein out of the broadband zone. Aleda, we're passing the baton to you. Let's pick it right back up. You've given us an introduction of who you are, what you're doing, but we want to go further into that. And from your lens, especially with the things that you've been involved with, the epigenetics, the things that you've been involved with when it comes to quantum, because we know that the use of AI and these large language foundational models leads us quicker to better understanding physics. And therein, where we might find a whole new set of technology introduced to even the best technologists on the planet, where no one, even on a molecule level, has too much of an understanding of what the impact might be with these technologies. But at the question that prevails right now, wellness and AI, is it a help or is it a hindrance? Give us what you got, please.
Okay, thanks for that. Yeah, so from my stance, I'm going to take it back to, again, reeling back to coming into the pandemic. So first and foremost, one of the number one things that we need is we need the understanding of conscious awareness. That has to happen because our leadership needs to be consciously aware and fully present when they're making like spontaneous decisions, right? Spontaneous decisions in the now, present moment, decisions and choices for all of us across the realm. And I say this because now we went from the pandemic straight into technology, right? And so it's going to have a more dramatic impact even than what we came into in the previous 2 years. So people being fully aware and understanding even our own physical systems, this is where I believe technology is giving us the edge, right? And from a perspective of quantum, neuroscience, all of those things, we are just beginning to understand our own capability and our own brain's capability. I mean, back in the early 2000s, medically, we didn't even know that we could have or create new neural pathways and connections. Now we know that there's over 86 billion neurons, all of those with endless synapses connectivity capability. So technology is, again, like you said, Christopher, putting us in a place of new horizons, new levels of comprehension about the world around us that we've never seen, understood, or had available to us before. So we are truly in a place as a humanity of all new, right? All new information across the board with all of our sciences and the world as we've known it.
How do we quantify this new cadre of information as a follow-up?
The information that's coming through, the resources that we have, the building capability that we have with the latest AI and the technology and the telehealth that we have. This, I believe, puts us in an arena with the capability of patients being able to completely, fully embrace and have a lot more control over their own well-being and health on an overall whole with everything in their life.
I see the world of technology, especially within wellness, dramatically changing. I see that one day that I believe that many people may not have the understanding of just how recent even our medical systems in the way that they've been built have been developed and carried on in society, where there was a time where our wellness practitioners would go to each and every individual's home. But that changed or transformed to where we began ingressing into a centralized location. But part of this understanding has always been the capability of telepresence to be able to reach the patient, the practitioner together. with these emerging technologies, not only does it allow us to do this, but as Katie had mentioned, the necessity of data, we're being able to deal and handle data in a way that we've never been able to before, to be able to access necessary and relevant information for one patient that may have impact for other patients around the world. Nick, let's jump onto this. When we talk about technologies and the approach to wellness, as you're a technologist first, but you're also walking in the chasms of wellness, what are you seeing the prevailing technologies, and how does artificial intelligence interact with what it is that you've been doing all this time?
Thank you, Chris. Well, it all comes down to data. You know, your AI model is really only dependent and able to really produce some value if you have solid, strong data to give it. And we've been working with a number of different practitioners over the last decade to really help them bring technology into their practice, and then allow for remote patient monitoring as well, so that it's not just at the ingress area where they congregate, but also out into the community. And how do you bring that data in? And that could be sleep data, that could be activity data, medication intake as well. So building all of that together, and then allowing for practitioners as well as patients to be able to learn from others that they may have never met before. That's a really big value add, where AI is able to sift through all of that data to make some recommendations either to the patient, to the provider, or both, and then allow for that conversation to happen. We just recently heard from one of our patients that he has started to use character AI, which is an AI that allows for him to speak to basically what he considers a therapist at any time of day, any time of night, and actually have good conversations. And it has been an adjunct, so he hasn't replaced his therapist with character.ai, but he has found a lot of relief that at 3 a.m., when he's feeling some anxiety and likely cannot get a hold of his practitioner, he can go on and he can talk to his character AI avatar and actually have a conversation. And so it's very important, I think, that this is not a replacement for practitioners. I think it's very much going to be supplemental, helpful. It's a bridge. It's something that could be a teacher. It could be a partner. There's many avenues that AI can take within medical, but most important is that this is very much a tool that can be leveraged both by the patient and the provider. So we're very excited to see how, as you mentioned, and it's very important to kind of really repeat, that you're able to learn from others all over the world as they're going through their own journeys, whether you are within the same company or even if you speak the same language. This is a very transformational time where we can learn from what's happening in, southern India, let's say, with depression in North America, without even having those conversations, where the AI is able to actually kind of bridge those gaps and bring that knowledge forward and hopefully allow for a much easier and more fruitful kind of wellness journey for people, where it democratizes the ability for people to access the latest and greatest technology without necessarily having the best insurance program or the most amount of money in the bank.
Democratized availability and accessibility is a really big deal. We're going to touch on so much of that in just a bit, but Dr. Bronstein, I hope that you're still with us. I want to be able to segue to you, sir, and within your body of work, especially dealing with children and youth of the world, if you will, do you feel like with today's technologies that are being adopted and the promise of technologies that to arrive tomorrow, do you feel that our children and youth of the world are in a safer and more well-positioned, or are they not? Your mic, sir.
Safer and more well-positioned, because you're going to have more intelligent medication prescriptions given. You're going to be able to avoid polypharmacy. You're going to drug interactions will be able to avoid more, and it'll really streamline and optimize psychiatric medication treatment. So I think it's going to be safer for children and adolescents in the future, incorporating AI.
Powerful expression. Thank you, Dr. Bronstein. Direct question with the direct answer. Katie, we're going to bring it to you. When we talk about democratized access, Nick brought up a great point, and something that you brought up initially when we started talking about data. We're talking about information. look, it's very interesting to see just in a little bit of time that in the 90s, most of the data that we were dealing with, Nick, was paper. But then we go into this sea change of going from hard to what we call soft, to being able to take all this data of information in the medical theater and translate that into a virtual state. But now we're able to take not just these things that are sitting there in a virtual state for readily available access of resource, but now we're able to do things that expand upon these this transition of data that we've accrued over the years, that we've been able to store within cloud computing, that's allowed us to be able to take this, and now we're doing something different with it, and it's arriving to something more. Katie, I want to go back into the profession of what you've been doing. You're well traveled. You go and travel often. You're dealing with servicemen and women. You're dealing with military. You're dealing with PTSD. What impact might this have? Because I believe that this is a very important question when we start thinking about the relatability between AI, wellness, and the militaries of this world, especially with the amount of PTSD that's happening and that we're seeing. Does this have the opportunity, or prospect of opportunity, to make things better for our servicemen, frontline workers, healthcare practitioners, those that are doing the things that most of us don't see?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think this is a piece of it, right, Chris, is mental health it's different. I mean, Dr. Bronstein came through medical school training, so he's trained much more on data and facts. But a lot of the mental health system, like I said before, it's based on theory. It's not based on facts. So that's something that AI definitely can help us to do with that. But the beautiful thing about, like I always say, it's like AI, ketamine, psychedelics. Those are going to be, that will help us to really kind of reframe the entire system. But, the brain's the brain. And across the world, it's a common language. My personal opinion is I think that our environments, I think the way that we're trained has a lot to do with the way that our mental health works. I think that, elementary school teachers may have more commonalities than veterans, than first responders. And I think that's a language that a lot of times that providers, we feel like we're meeting people where they are, but we're not all the time, because more so people are putting their supposed narrative, I guess, on individuals. So instead of looking at veterans training and as to how they have consciously trained their subconscious to react in situations that they're not in control of in order to help to regain control, sometimes we may more so look at their childhood and focus on their childhood, not really focusing on their short term. So I think there's an integration that you have to focus on their short term trainings as well as their long term environmental factors. And a lot of people just don't have that capacity to look at things differently because we work with athletes a lot, and I played collegiate sports. I understand like athletes' mindsets a little bit better than maybe someone who's never played sports. But I've had therapists tell me as an athlete that, oh, well, that all that came from your childhood. And I was like, no, it didn't. It came from the way I was trained in order to actually succeed in a sport. So it's the same way, veterans, you drop veterans off in the middle of nowhere when they get deployed, and they have to learn to function in a very foreign environment. But the thing about veterans, and I had first responders actually mention this to me, and it just, gives you greater insight. The thing about veterans is veterans get dropped off in a foreign land, and that's their battlefield. As compared to first responders live in their battlefield every day. So if they're a police officer and then they have to respond to something negative, their family may live 5 miles away. Because there's sometimes the first responders say they have it worse than veterans. Veterans say they have it worse than first responders. I don't care. I just want to help people. But I do think that veterans or first responders have a very good argument when they state that, that if they shoot somebody 5 miles away from their kids' schools, and that's a different type of trauma that a lot of people just don't recognize. So I think for us in society, as we're trying to, I fully believe in acceptance of everyone, yes, but I think there needs to be respect of each individual culture, each individual training, each individual environment. And I think there has to be consideration for each. And I don't think that the mental health world is there yet. I don't think the therapists are there yet. I don't think psychiatrists are there yet. I think Dr. Bronstein is an anomaly of the psychiatry world. And if you speak to psychiatrists who understand a lot more research in psychedelics, you can get on a whole different level of conversation with them as to exactly how the world needs to be. But as Dr. Bronstein knows, there's a lot of psychiatrists and a lot of therapists. They're just not there. And it's probably 80%, 90% of that world right now. And it's very unfortunate, but it's almost like we need to take this whole world and we need to upgrade it to version 2.0 because it's not there yet. And literally people are dying because of it.
Dr. Bronstein, can I ask, and this may be a little bit an unconventional question, but it begs to ask, does the world of AI and psychedelics work together?
Absolutely. I mean, the hope is that down the road with AI, we can really map exactly how the psychedelics are working and then figuring out how to evoke those responses in the brain without molecules. That's really the next level. Psychedelics. How do we create states with
Can somebody please get Dr. Bronstein some Starlink? He needs a little bit of Wi-Fi in his life. It was so intriguing. But Nick, I'm going to route to you. And then Alita, I want you to address the same. WellnessGPT. Right now, generative pre-trained transformers are widespread. For the very most part, they're a horizontal thing where you get this chasm of information that you can summons up. You can have this dialogue with this very simple AI, which some people believe is AGI. That's for a different discussion that we'll be having in June. But for AGI audience, for those that are with this artificial general intelligence, there are many that say we haven't arrived there. There are many that are saying that we have, especially those that are of the psychology note that are saying they've never interacted with the type of technology that has the capability to leverage the data within its own self and to be able to adjust its information and its rendering output. They're not used to dealing with that. And they're saying that it's not necessarily what they first think is sentient, but it is on the front lines of something that's interacting like a human being would, sitting across from them, if you will. But it begs to ask the question, when we talk about generative pre-trained transformers in today's modern world of what we're looking at in society, is it prudent? Does it make sense, since all these large language foundational models are scraping the data and availability of data in the world, the internet, if you will, the web, if you will, does it make sense for us to begin to vertical focus on specific models that are dealing with specific subjects in specific industries, primarily wellness, to be able to take a whole cohort community of wellness practitioners and explorers and to be able to take from their mind, their human intelligentsia, and to route that into a foundational model that will have accurate information, that will have specific direct resourced information. Now, the information is subjective, but it will have resourced information on who is saying what under the banner of wellness instead of the interpretation of AI. Does it make sense to have a wellness GPT, Nick?
Absolutely, it does. And I like where you're going with kind of, putting into verticals different views. So you could have the Ayurvedic view, you could have the PubMed research view to take translational medicine from the bench, let's call it, the clinical research organization, into the clinic. And so it would be interesting to have the world where you did have a multitude of wellness GPT models that are verticalized, and then they are able to actually have conversations with themselves. So you could have a second opinion, a third opinion, a fourth opinion, all from different areas of medical and different areas of research that are able to come together, have a conversation. The patient gets to see what the Ayurvedic GPT thinks, and then they also get to see what the PubMed latest research translational models thinks, and then they could see what somewhere across the Atlantic thinks. And together the patient could actually have a little bit more of an informed decision, and then kind of as an aggregate, the Wellness GPT could say what they recommend based on the 10 opinions that were received from the different models. So we are democratizing a lot of information, and that's the most exciting thing. When I first got into the health tech world, I started to hear the word translational medicine. And what it means is taking from the clinical research world and bringing it into the clinic. And maybe as a Luddite in the health world, I thought that's what doctors were doing. I thought that they were bringing, the research world into their practice on a fairly regular basis. But that's actually quite an anomaly. And if you speak with a practitioner, it's not expected that they have been up on the research in their field, and they're bringing it into their practice. It's not a straight requirement. Now, Wellness GPT, that we're calling it here, can do that, can sift through PubMed, Google Scholar, and really bring all of that information and bring it together with the unique variances of a human, of the person that they're actually trying to help, and really bridge those two together. And you don't need a group of interns. You don't need, it to be a professor at a big university to help you with that. This is something that can be in the palm of your hand with your phone. So it's a very, very exciting time where we can bring untold amounts of data into actual summarization so that people can make sense of it, and then they can actually bring it into their world and hopefully, get better as a result.
Indeed, and thank you for sharing, Nick. Alita, I follow up with you. Do you share in this similar enthusiasm and excitability from your area expertise of work?
The answer is yes on an overall whole, because this addresses the whole wellness of the overall being. There's a huge gap right now, and a need for there to be understanding from a homeopathic remedy medicine stance, as well as prescription needs. And so this would allow many practitioners that haven't, they don't have a strong understanding of natural anything yet. If there's some label on the back of anything, right, it says ask your doctor, but doctors don't have all of the answers because they haven't been trained in some of these fields, and they're specialized fields. And so I believe that this would also potentially allow strongly for whole integration of healing systems globally across the world. So, more of a treatment aspect that allows for an entire treatment process for the overall well-being of people, from mental health all the way through. And when you mentioned, like, who are we going to source the data from, right? And so I do think that there's a strong need for paying attention to reliability of where we're sourcing information from as well. I think it's great that it's all coming in. When it comes to wellness in particular, I think it's very important, right, to pay attention to where all of the data is being scooped in from as well. That's it on my part on this. So the answer is yes on an overall whole. I'm super excited about the direction that this can take us in, because it changes, again, everything has changed. Our entire world has changed, and people just don't yet realize it, I don't think.
Dr. Bronstein, from your approach and from your lens of expertise, when we talk about having a wellness GPT, do you feel like this is something that's feasible for near future? And if so, what do you believe are best steps towards taking it to take that next step? More startling for Dr. Bronstein. Katie, I'm rounding it over to you. Will you see this as a value add if we do indeed go towards the sentiments of what Alita and Nick have expressed when we talk about the benefit of Wellness GPT? Do you feel in your line of work that Wellness GPT can be an asset, or do you feel like it might be a threat towards what you do for wellness?
Well, I'll tell you, in the medical world, they're all going to feel like it's a threat initially, because it's what we do, right? It's a very egocentric world. But here's the thing about it, right, is, it's first, do no harm. So I feel like the more that we can standardize pieces and make aspects more consistent, I think that there's going to be no argument, right? And that's the data piece of it. So, like I said, I'm all about the data aspects. The anesthesia world, love that world. The psychiatry world, it's offensive actually how bad it can be, and with the psychiatry piece. But I think that what we want to do is we want to try to standardize with the data pieces, because I think it's like 78% of people are misdiagnosed in mental health. And I mean, and put that into capacity as to thought processes with like heart surgery. Like, what if you were misdiagnosed? Like, oh, sorry, Chris, you didn't really need heart surgery. We misdiagnosed you. Like, can you understand, the capacity of that, and you're talking about just the cardiac system, right? It's just one other organ. The brain is the ultimate computer system of the entire body, to where there's actually data showing that if you do psychedelics, at least one time in your life, your actual cardiac function is improved for the rest of your life. And they're actually showing 2 people who have done psychedelics after having myocardial infarction, so like a heart attack, their tissues actually repair more quickly, right? So we look at cardiac function or misdiagnosis of renal function or your kidneys or whatever else as like being this like, oh my gosh, that's completely unheard of. Like, how could they do that? And every day we're misdiagnosing people of the brain. Every day.
Katie, I have to have a quick follow-up just for brevity to make sure that the audience understands, for those that are leaping in here with GatherVerse.live, and we welcome all of you. When we talk about psychedelics, we're not talking about taking a stroll on the beach and dipping acid and shrooms. What are we talking about? Can you draw that out just so we have a little bit more clarity on that? Because it's widely subjected to understanding the days of Woodstock, if you will. I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page here.
Yes. So here's the no one's ever really been able to really look at the brain consistently, because like I said, with mental health, it's very much been a lot of theories, a lot of FDA, big pharma medications, things like that. So while their data is consistent, a lot of times that data can be slightly skewed to whatever results the person wants to see, right? So psychedelics, psilocybin, LSD, MDMA, there's a whole wide array, right, of psychedelics out there, but then also the drug ketamine that's been around for over 50 years now. We're seeing that they all have some type of psychedelic similarities. And basically what they're able to do is there's a ton of studies out. They've been working on studies since the 90s, probably the 80s. Dr. B could speak to this more so than I could. But I think the maps where they were actually looking at psychedelics started in 1985. And this is so basically a little bit of a history. Yes, Woodstock, everyone did psychedelics. Everyone got scared. No one knew, even though they were having really great studies showing some great results. That was when Nixon actually outlawed all psychedelics. So it stopped all the data. In 1985, it got started back again with psychedelics. And now we're seeing that ketamine, psilocybin, MDMA, there's actually a lot of great FDA trials that are out there with these substances that are showing consistency with dosing and consistency in results. And the efficacy that we're seeing across the board with psychedelics, there's zero comparison basically with the traditional medications that we have right now for mental health as compared to psychedelics. And psychedelics are also showing us that you can actually go into remission of your symptoms with mental health, right? Or you can break this cycle of what your mental health is doing. And it's this can be depression, anxiety, trauma, PTSD, PTS, whatever people want to call that, suicidality, even neurodegenerative aspects. So Parkinson's, ALS, multiple sclerosis, MS, dementia. It's the brain, right? We're seeing that the brain's actually responding very, very positively to psychedelics. But yes, as you mentioned, we don't want to be like out on the streets buying these drugs or anything like that, even though that's the only angle that the DEA is kind of giving us right now, because they're all illegal unless you are in a study in the United States. Fortunately, Nick has a psilocybin farm down in Jamaica where psilocybin's legal, and he actually has psilocybin retreats through Wake. But we're seeing that there is consistency there with psychedelics. There's dosing consistency. And this is something everyone needs to be curious about, because it's changing the complete way that we look at mental health, in a very non-biased global response, because people are duplicating the studies in Australia as much as they are in Canada versus the United States. And this is something that the world's never seen before. So I think it's going to change the entire landscape of mental health.
Indeed. It seems to me once we have more access to information, Nick, and once more people and communities have more better access to information, they're going to see a world unlike anything they've ever known before when it comes to the entry of wellness and medicine. We often relate to Eastern practices and Western practices, but can't we possibly imagine seeing a world that's much more beyond East and West and completely redefining and imagining how we look at this?
That's the most exciting time about this exciting time, is that we do have this convergence of psychedelics and AI, and they are both democratizing access to wellness. You have a world in the West anyway, where unless you had insurance or unless you were wealthy enough to buy privately, you didn't have access to the latest and greatest, whether it was information or the medical, the drugs. And now with psychedelics, they're not thousands of dollars. And with AI, it's not thousands of dollars. And so you have this wonderful time where people can actually take ownership of their mind and ownership of their wellness through tools like AI and tools like psychedelics, and some of these new trained practitioners in places like Oregon, which is the first state where people can actually access in the US. And we do see the opportunity of these tools being available state by state, growing very quickly, similar to how cannabis did. There's so much we don't know still. We're using some of the latest technology like functional MRI to be able to analyze the brain and to see how psychedelics are actually affecting the brain. But it's still very, very early days. But back to what Katie said, the research that's coming out, and this is from places like Johns Hopkins, Imperial College of London, it is you cannot argue it, that the data is showing that people are being helped 80+% with things like depression through the help of psychedelics. With the antidepressant market, the SSRIs, the SNRIs, we're seeing about a 20%. So it is a 4x multitude of progress, positive progress, when you work with things like psychedelics. And what's amazing is that this isn't a daily thing that's required. It's not a pill per day. This is something that is very transformative. And then for the most part, people don't need another dose for 12 to 24 months, if ever again. So when you pair that with psychedelics, when you pair psychedelics with AI, we have an amazing time where we can build a huge corpus of data, whether it's the brain data, the subjective data, the objective data, their sleep, their activity, and then use AI to find meaning out of it. But as Katie said, and we've heard it the same, people who try psychedelics do have a cardiac response. And a lot of that is because they are more open to going outside. They're more open to going shopping. Their anxiety is less. And so it's something that a lot of people prescribe to mental health, but the body is affected quite beneficially as well. So it's a very, very exciting time.
It's a very fascinating consideration. I have a bit of an itch related, and I'm hoping if you can help me scratch. I hear it, WebMD. I hear it, Johns Hopkins. I hear it, Kaiser Permanente, Kaleida Health, Stanford Medical, NYU. I hear it, these keepers of this data, these builders of these platforms. But I also know in this world that there's a whole fleet of individual practitioners that operate under their own leave, if you will. So we have large corporation company, and we have the individual practitioners and small boutique, if you will, practicing operations. And I know that Nick and Katie, we talked about privacy when it comes into the reality of the patient. Here in North America, we talk about HIPAA compliance, don't we? Aleda, I want you to bring from your lens, when we look at this dichotomy, we look at this balance, uneven balance, the approach that we'll take when it comes to developing WellnessGPT, are we at a point right now, because we see these makers of these technologies going to Congress and to other governments, and governments are wrapping their minds around what it is that's being built in the hallowed halls of Google and Microsoft and OpenAI. And they're saying, wow, as Senator Dick Durbin of the United States Congress said last week, we are used to approaching technologists in Silicon Valley and throughout to help keep them accountable for what they're building and distributing out into the public and keeping of the information of the public. We're not used to those coming from Silicon Valley and elsewhere arriving saying that we need the help of government because this technology that we have unleashed that has been rapidly adopting, even as we yet converge today, is unlike anything that's ever reached the shores of market and adoption before, and we're going to need help. Sundar Pichai, CEO of Google, said we're going to need philosophers, we're going to need government help, we're going to need law enforcement, we're going to need technologists, we're going to need those in technology, not in technology, to help us to be able to guide this. Here's my question. Aleda, when I look at what's happening in real time right now with this explosion of AI, is this the time to call all willing and able members to participate in developing this next era of intelligence that's being manufactured and developed? Or should this be in the hands of only large corporations and companies that have the real means and the deal flow capability wherewithal? Or should this stay within public sector? These are tough questions. You're on.
So my thought process with this is all hands on deck. One of the beauties about this open capability is that it allows for open forum. And so I'll give you an example like this. Oftentimes we have CEOs and leaders who build and develop amazing corporations, but there's gaps in a lot of what they structure and create that evolve into huge inefficiencies and or lack in some capacity. It could be designed so much better if you're always gathering information from those who are in the departments, who are in the specialized fields, who are in the trenches in those areas, and getting the information from them before you design and build. Does that make sense? So the biggest mistake they make is they pack their ego to the table. And they think they are the most genius mind in the room. And we now should all be to a place to where we value everyone's genius mind and their strengths and their specialties. Right. And we should be gathering as much information from these individuals as possible. And this is more what I would consider high level thinking. But this is why I say it has to be high level conscious thinking, right? So conscious awareness, psychology today, it's like they say we're conscious 5% of the time. I think psychedelics, my perspective is that it probably opens our conscious awareness. EEGs will show us a lot more about all kinds of things and activity in the brain with all of these different things, right? So that's something that I'm sure will be watched and mapped, but it also creates an open heart coherence. So when you have an open heart coherence and you have a logical mind functioning together, that's optimum. That's what needs to be cultivated. And the people who are in leadership positions need to be developed on, would be the first thing that I would say. High level thinkers need to be a part of this because it impacts everything, and it should be globally. This is humanity that we're talking about right now. Like this isn't a game. We are on the cusp of everything brand new. Everything brand new.
Indeed. Thank you for answering, and such an insightful response, Aleda. Katie, I have two questions for you. The first being, when we talk about the front line, we talk about first responders who you intimately have been dealing with for some time. Do we, in this present age, where PTSD is seemingly at an all-time high now, do we today have enough practitioners to serve the working world of military and first responders?
No, we don't have enough practitioners, period. Right. So when you go to medical school, so nurses usually get about, undergrad nurses who get like their bachelor's degree, they get about 4 months training of psychiatry, and they do rotations and such. No one really knows that 4 months of training is about 300% more training than most physicians get in medical school. Because with medical schools right now, physicians are only getting about 6 weeks of mental health training before they actually get, released, and they become the ultimate, where I think family practice, Dr. Bronstein would know these statistics more so, but I think family practice prescribes about 70% of all mental health drugs. So when they've only had 6 weeks of actual studies in school, and they're actually giving this mental health piece, they become the, not experts, but they become the majority, right? There's a standard of care is that your primary care is actually addressing your mental health more. So what happens in medicine is everyone becomes territorial, very much so territorial. And it's much worse in the outpatient world than it is in the inpatient world. But what happens is when you go to the ER, if you're having suicidality, right? So, hey, I'm having suicidal thoughts, call 911, go to your closest ER. So what do we do in the ER? When you come into the emergency room, if you're having suicidal thoughts, first thing we do is medicate you. Because we don't want you to hurt yourself. So we're going to chemically sedate you, right? There's no talking. There's nothing addressing the suicidal piece. So we're going to sedate you with some type of benzodiazepine or another drug called Haldol. And it sedates you. And then if you're still suicidal when you wake up, then we're going to have you committed. And we're just going to hold you there because we're not comfortable talking about mental health because we've never been trained as providers. Well, then you get psychiatrists who come in, and not like Dr. Bronstein, but you get psychiatrists who come in who say, well, we're the professionals in mental health. No one else needs to be treating mental health except us. And my personal opinion is we need to start educating the entire world on mental health, and we need to flip the script, right? Because right now there's a 70% shortage of providers in mental health space. Psychiatrists, it takes about 7 years to grow one. So we're going to lose half the nation in 7 years, because everyone's killing themselves right now. But then two, the interesting piece of like the way we look at mental illness is with suicidal thoughts, we treat people like they're mentally ill if they have a suicidal thought, when 70% of people at one time during their life will have a suicidal thought. 70%. So it's actually more common than it is not. So my personal opinion is, if you have a suicidal thought, call 911, go close to CR. No, don't do that. My personal opinion is we need to switch the way that we're educating everyone. We need to start with their little babies that are in kindergarten to start these coping mechanisms. And basically we say, when you have thoughts of hurting yourself or others, not if, but when you have thoughts, then these are coping skills that we want you to utilize, right? Because we just need to expect that this is going to happen. And I have a 13-year-old daughter. I was actually talking to her yesterday, and I'm still working on trying how to address this, but she's very consciously aware of mental health. We speak about mental health very granularly all the time. But she was talking about the kids in her 7th grade class, and how it's very common for kids to talk about their suicidality. And, they're like, yeah, like so-and-so, she told me, she's like, I was caught off guard a little bit, like I said, but she said, no, they talk about suicide all the time, and they talk about their plan. And I'm like, have you told anybody this? And she said, no, we don't want to rat each other out. And I asked her, I said, is it more females or males? And she says more females than males. But she's like, yeah, mom, like this is common. Like kids talk all the time how they're going to kill themselves if something doesn't work out, because they talk about how there's no purpose in life. And I mean, it was a good conversation that we were having, but I was like thinking, we've got to make these kids feel like it's okay to come and tell us this so we can help them to build additional skills, not to say, oh, you're sick, let me put you on drugs, let me put you on medications. And, and another commonality that I use a lot of times is like, say Nick wants to be an NFL athlete. Okay, so here's what we would do in mental health. If Nick wants to become, a linebacker in the NFL. In mental health, we would say, Nick, I'm going to put you on testosterone. You don't need to do anything else. I'm going to put you on testosterone. Let me know how the NFL goes. When in reality, Nick may need some additional training in order to play in the NFL and additional skills built, right? But in mental health right now, we just expect people have skills. And if they don't, and they're not functioning correctly at their thought processes, we just give them medications and say, here, this will help your thought processes. And it makes no sense as to what we're doing. So, there's, as Alita said, we're at a huge transformational time right now for humanity. If we don't address it literally, I think we're losing more people now than any war has ever taken for mental health. And it's like, we're in the biggest war that we've ever been in, and nobody can see it. We are our own worst enemy, literally. So there's a lot of growth.
Thank you, Katie, for sharing that. Nick and Alita, to leave the last 2 minutes with you as a follow-up that I was going to follow up with Katie, but time escapes us, doesn't it? Being that we do not have enough health practitioners to serve mankind, humankind, for human betterment, does this justify us delivering a fleet of AI assistants and guided help under the banner and control of the practitioner? Nick?
100% it does. I think that whether it's our economic system or the traditional medical system or the combination of both, we have had a system where you're not in control of your wellness. And if you have an issue, you must go to some place and talk to someone. And what they tell you to do, you must follow. And if you want to get a second opinion, there's a little bit of a myth with the first opinion, and they don't like to hear that you want a second opinion. It's been a very broken model for a long time. And this has led to a shortage, led to burnout, led to a lot of angst between patient and provider. And it is this time right now that is really the convergence point where people are kind of fed up with what we've had before. And they feel the delays. They can't get into an appointment for weeks, months sometimes. It is a necessity. And so is the invention of all, necessity is the mother of all invention. And when we're seeing it, we are seeing that people need to be able to take control of their own mental wellness, their physical wellness, and they want more data, and they want more opinions, and they want more information. And unfortunately, they don't have a lot of money to be able to do all of those things under the traditional system. But now what we have is AI that is able to sift through all of the data, whether it's different schools of thought or different research studies, and then they can make their own decisions up. And this is what we need as humans. We need to be self-sufficient as humans for the most part. We need to pull from tools where they're available. We need to make our own decisions. And I think that AI is going to allow us that power.
Thank you, Nick. Alita, we're dropping you with the last word. Please give us your brief expression.
Yeah, I'm just going to quickly say that there's as many miracles happening every single day as there are tragedies, and we're just not seeing it broadcasted across all of our news stations. So conscious awareness, again, and understanding of that is where it's at, and people finding their purpose. You hit on that, Katie. People need their purpose. That's what we need help. We need to help facilitate in the world.
We value each of you, audience at GatherVerse.live. With the many of you that are with us today, we're so happy to see you. And whether you're on YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter, we're happy to see you as well. WellnessGPT, we've come to find out today that it is relevant and rather appropriate